All right, as you may be able to tell from the piles of sawdust, I'm well into this project. And I went and had a look at some of the footage I shot from the first part of it, and I don't think I can really use it. It's not going to create a story you can follow. What I'm working on here is I'm milling cedar. I'm working on a deck project. I want to build a deck for a friend, and I thought it'd be fun to do chainsaw milled lumber for it. And I got a stack of cedar logs from this tree, and I thought, all right, let's do it. I've done a couple of videos before on chainsaw milling lumber. I've done a couple of things. I just kind of played around with it, mostly with my Harbor Freight chainsaw, so definitely amateur level still. I've done several more on this project, but I've spent a lot of time mostly dorking with chainsaws. I've got this Poulan Pro PR4218, which is the chainsaw you can get at Harbor Freight for less than $200. And I've got two Chinesium MS361 steel knockoffs. And they're great. They make a lot more power than the Poulan, but I'm seriously spending more time working on them than I am cutting with them. They're breaking constantly. And yeah, parts are cheap. So break a pull cord and it's like, all right, $7, get a new one. But honestly, with the amount of things I'm breaking, it's starting to add up. Crankshaft, piston, cylinder, rings. I broke 2 exhausts. How do you break an exhaust? I've had 2 exhausts fall apart on me. I've had a pull cord fall apart on me. It took me forever to track down what has to just be a design flaw. I don't really get it. The keyway in the flywheel is too big. It's not too wide, it's too deep, but there's enough space in the keyway for the key to fall out of the shaft, and then the flywheel can shift, and then your timing's wrong. And so I had saws running all kinds of screwy, and I couldn't figure out why, and I was mucking with the carburetors trying to fix it, and it was the timing. So I made a part to fix that, and I mean, the list goes on. I've fixed a dozen things on those chainsaws, and I'm sick of it. Also, the milling process is there's a lot going on, and I want to talk about a lot of it. I think it's interesting. Maybe you don't, in which case, see you later. Click next. But I want to talk about it, and after thinking about it, I think that doing it in order, it's too much up front, because the first cut is really difficult. There's a lot going on, a lot to think about, and I was trying to explain that at the same time I was explaining what is chainsaw milling and how does the jig work and how do you do the cuts and everything else. It was just too much. It was too much at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the middle. You see here I've got a log of tap done. I'm going to film starting now. I'm going to take a slab off of this and show how that's done, and that's pretty straightforward and can explain it. And then when I get to the next log and film the first cut, a lot of what I'm doing is going to make more sense because you'll already have seen this step. Right now I am back to my Poulan saw because both the Farmertec are on the healing bench waiting for new parts. One's got a broken exhaust, one's got a broken, both of them have the plastic screw gear that drives the oil pumps have both failed. Because one failed, and then I robbed the other saw for that part, and then the next one failed. So they're both out of commission because they can't oil, which is a shame because they make a lot more power. It's a lot slower with the Harbor Freight saw, but the Harbor Freight saw has the overwhelming quality of it runs, and I can start it and I can run it. So right now it's the golden boy. We'll see how long that lasts. I have a crazy idea in my head that may or may not come to fruition. I won't spoil you. But we're gonna start with the basics. We're gonna mill a slab off of this log. So the idea here is I need 2x6s to build this deck. And this is a cedar log. And the way you get those is you cut slices out of it. And I found I cut them about 1.8 inches thick because the chainsaw leaves a pretty rough finish. That leaves me enough material to clean up to make them nice once they're cut into board. So I slab them 1.8, and then I take them over and I take a skill saw and I rip cut them to width, 5.5 inches for a 2x6. And then plane them and round over corners as necessary and tidy things up. But the first step is the most labor intensive by far and the trickiest because you're dealing with a whole log. And it uses this. This is an Alaskan chainsaw mill with some modifications. This part here, this clamp, this arm, and this table are made by Granberg. You can buy it on Amazon. And the idea is that it clamps onto your chainsaw bar here, and then you can adjust it up and down and slide that along a flat surface and cut with this and slice logs. First I added this. I clamped a board on top and screwed a chunk of firewood on there. I thought it was going to be temporary, and well, it worked, so I haven't changed it. This is just a counterweight, because before that was in there, you had to hold onto this handle and push down all the time to keep the saw from, you want it to tip that way. So I added this, and now it just sits on this surface and doesn't want to go anywhere and gives me more consistent cuts. And then I was having problems with angularity of the blade, so I added just out of scrap wood here, I added another clamp on the tip of the saw. I got a long enough bar that I can do this and still have enough width to do these logs. I got some bigger ones over there. We'll see how those go. Hello? All right, what was I talking about? I talked about the counterbalance, I talked about the arm, and then there's a old ratty strap in there I used to pull it. Essentially this thing is just exhaust fumes and vibrations and kind of nasty to be around, and so I prefer to tow rather than push. It's designed that you kneel next to the log behind it and push it along, but I find that using a strap to pull it from 8 feet away is a lot more pleasant. And then there's a squeeze clamp on the handle I use to hold the trigger down while it's cutting, and that works really well. And so you notice this distance is a lot more than the 1.8 inches that I do for each cut. That's because I use an aluminum ladder. Essentially it's just a straight edge. I take that and set it down on top of the log, I'll show you that in a second, and screw it in place, and then this runs along that. And a lot of people just do that for their first cut. Put that on the bark or whatever and then run this down and it gets you started about right. I've found that I do it every cut and I get really consistent results, so that if it washes errors away rather than adding. So, but yeah, I'll set one up. So it's just a chunk of a ladder with 5 stubby 2x4 chunks screwed to it. 2x4s give me something to screw through. Try and run my screws in right at the edge into the bark so that I'm not putting holes in the wood I'm going to use. And that's why I don't mind setting up the ladder every single time, because it takes that long. All right, let's cut. So if you've been sitting there wondering what I was going to do when I got to the end of the ladder, you're overthinking it. I'm going to move the ladder. Ta-da! All right, once I get a couple inches from the end, grab a couple of felling wedges, pop them in the cut back behind the saw. That keeps the slab from pinching the saw blade when I come out the end. And then I finish it out pushing. There we go. Tools for this one are pretty straightforward. I got a couple really straight 2x8s. I used a string line, bolted them together with a splice in the middle so that they're nice and straight all the way through. Under those, I screwed on just some sacrificial 2x4s sticking out here and then set it on sawhorses. And there's a couple of spacers between the 2x4s and 2x8s so that the distance from this surface to this surface is 1.8-ish, which is the thickness of the slab. And so the slab comes and it sits here, and then I use circular saw, skill saw, this is a Bosch, and a Craig cheapo rip guide. Constantly clogs with sawdust. But other than that, works great. Oh, and the numbers wear off, that's a bummer. This is where I rip cut the slab into rough boards. I'm gonna go get that slab and bring it over. Here's that slab we just cut. It's important to set it down small side up. How do I say that? Bark side up, concave down. I want the usable width of wood on the top to be smaller than the usable width of wood on the bottom, so that I can measure and do my layout here and not worry about the curvature of the log, cutting it on the bottom and ending up with a pithy, waney, nasty corner on a board. This is 14, which is a bad number. I mean, it's fine. The problem is I need 2x6s, which are 5.5 wide. So 2 2x6s is 11, 3 inches of waste. That's a lot of waste. The slab before this, one closer to the center of the log, I was able to get 2 2x6s and a 2x4 out of. I don't need any 2x4s for the deck, but they're handy to have around. That's useful wood. 3 inches is just under the useful mark. I could cut this into a 2x6 and 2 2x4s, but I need 2x6s. So what that means is that I'm going to just cut 2 2x6s out of it and have a lot of waste. It's a bummer, but that's how it goes. We're cutting up circles into rectangles. You lose some. And I don't need 2x3s. My waste strips on the end, I process further and cut stickers out of them, and smaller lumber. I'm going to make a little crate out of 1x that I'll get out of some of this stuff, and the rest goes to firewood. So it's not like going to a landfill or anything like that, but still, 14 is a bad number for what I'm doing today. The upshot of that is it makes what I'm about to do super, super easy. What I'm doing here is I have, this is my straight edge that I'm going to reference for all my cuts. And I measure across and I figure out where on this I want my cuts to be. And when there's very little waste, that's great because there's very little waste, but it means that I have to jimmy this around and get it lined up just so and make my cuts right along the bark edge. And the kerf width, the blade starts to matter, and I got to get everything just so. With this, I'm going to get it no problem. The fact that the ends do a little bit of that is no issue because I'm going to have 1.5 inches on each side that's going to just not get used. So I know I need 11. I got 10 to 24 here. I'm going to go like 11.5 to 22.5. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to go down the log, and anywhere, this is academic on this one, as I said, because it's super easy, but anywhere there's a dip in the bark or an inclusion of a branch or something, I'm going to make sure 11.5, 22.5, and it's not going to include anything I want to get rid of. There's a big old knot right here, and I can actually disappear it if I go 11 to 22. A 1/2 inch shift is no big deal. Give me a little more of that knot, but that's fine. That's going to prevent that knot from being right on the corner of one of my deck boards. Yeah, I'm happy with that. The saw blade is a 1/16 of an inch wide. So my first cut, I'm going to make it 22 and a 1/16. My next cut, I'm going to make it, what is that, 16 and a half. And my last cut, I'm going to make it 10 and 15/16. And then these 2x4s on the bottom here, they don't really do that much to support the work. The sawhorses do that. They exist to give me something to screw it down to so it doesn't move while I'm cutting. My cut's going to be around 11, so I'm going to make sure my screws aren't anywhere near that cut line so I don't trash my blade. My well-loved Craig jig has all the numbers worn off. So I get to do this like an animal. Standard three-handed operation, and it's 22 and a 1/16. See what I mean about waste? Eh? We'll make something out of that. It's just not going to be a deck. Next cut is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a half. 16 and a half. That matches what I wrote down here. Let her rip. Like my trigger lock? High tech. There's one beautiful 12-foot 2x6, stacked with all its friends. And we are going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a half, just 10 and 15/16, which matches what we wrote down earlier. So I like to pull with this setup because it lets me put my left hand on the rip fence here and keep it pressed into my straight edge. When I push, one, these are in the way, so I'm way out in the side pushing, and it's very poor ergonomics. But two, I would notice that I had some wavy lines. I would get a gap here. This doesn't set the angle very well. It sets the distance. But if the saw started to drift a little bit, if it started to do that, it would come off here and then it would guide in the cut it was already making. I got some bad boards. Me release my head from its cocoon of PPE. Whew. All right. Two beautiful 2x6s. Originally, I did all of these steps by batch. I chainsawed all the slabs, and I stacked those up. And then I took the slabs and I put them up here and I rip cut them and stacked those up. And then I took those and I planed them all and stacked those up. And then I did a finish path, which involves sanding out any burn marks, rounding over critical corners, squaring up ends, that kind of thing. I've since wrapped this rip cut step serial with the slabbing. Because as you see, it's quick and easy. And by doing it, every time I have a slab, by ripping it immediately, It doesn't take that long, and it saves me having to stack the slab somewhere. Saves a lot of space. I'll batch do the planing. I'm going to wait until the whole log is done, and I've got all that stacked up there. It'll probably be 10 2x6s by then. And then I'm going to get out the planer. I'm going to do all that at once, and then do all the finishing at once. So, I'll show you that when we get to it. Little air mattress pump. I mainly use it to stoke fires, campfires. But it is great for finding screws once they're covered in sawdust. All right, so the process is just that, repeated. I'm going to slab up and rip the rest of that log, and then I will see you again when it's time to do something interesting. The next step is to plane. You can see this is a chainsaw cut finish, and there's big, rough, washboard road kind of texture to it, which I've made some stuff with this. It's kind of looks neat, to be honest, but we're going for a deck here. This is going to be walk on it barefoot, want it to be pretty nice. So I've cut these oversized. They're over 1 3/4 inches thick. They're like 1.8. And so the next step is to take all of these boards and run them through the planer and take them down to 1.5 inches thick, smooth on both sides. That log yielded 11 2x6s and 3 2x4s, 12 feet. So that's pretty good. They've been slabbed, ripped, and planed. Now their final dimension is time to just kind of tidy them up. The last steps before I stack them and they're ready for assembly is I touch up the sides, since I just cut them with a skill saw pretty quick and dirty. I just tip them up on edge, take a palm sander with like 100 grit sandpaper in it, and just run down each side and take out any burn marks from the saw or the worst of the fuzzies. For a deck, this is plenty good enough, quick sand, and they're ready to go. And then for the ones destined to be deck boards, I'll look at both sides, choose which side is going to be the up face, trim one end, and then I take a little 1/4 inch palm router, round over bit, and route 3 edges. But that's it. I'm going to do those couple of quick and easy steps, and then take these boards and stack them underneath the sawhorses, and then it's time to start another log.